All art is political, but some art is more political than others. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the history of political comics and graphic novels. Then, I'm going to analyse what makes the comic medium so good at sending a message. After that, I'm going to go over ICE and the various evils associated with that agency. Finally, this video is going to introduce you to artist J Andrew Weld, who is currently putting together a graphic novel about abolishing ICE and how you can help with fundraising. To attempt to give you the entire history of political comics would be an immense task. I'm instead going to give you an overview, looking at some specific cases that interest me. If you want a more thorough history, I highly recommend the books Transnational Perspectives on Graphic Novels and Comic Art Propaganda, A Graphic History. So, how to start a topic as big as this? Superman. General rule, if you want to put together any sort of history about Western comics, when in doubt, just start with Superman. In the September 1939 edition of Look magazine, Superman creators Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster were asked to create a 2-page story on how Superman would end the then burgeoning World War II. It turns out that Superman, then referred to as the saviour of the helpless and oppressed, would simply race into Germany, grab Hitler, rush over to Russia, grab Stalin, then bring both of them before the League of Nations to end the war. It's not an incredible narrative or anything, but there had been less than 20 Superman comics up until this point, so it's kind of an incredible artifact. This strip is also notable for containing a strong anti-war message at a time while entering the war was still extremely unpopular in America. An even more famous example of a Golden Age superhero fighting Nazis is, who else? Captain America. Created by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby in 1941, again, before America entered the war, Cap's debut famously showed the Star-Spangled Warrior punching Hitler on the front cover. The creators of Cap and Superman are all of Jewish heritage, and opposed the Nazis wholeheartedly. They used the then burgeoning genre of superhero comics to push these messages onto an audience who might never have considered the war until the attack on Pearl Harbor. While the politics of superheroes is fascinating, and there's a long, sometimes shameful, history of it, the rest of this video is mainly going to focus on independent creator-owned comics, where the politics of the creators are less likely to be diffused by corporate interests. First, we're going to look at biographical and autobiographical works. First up is Martin Luther King and the Montgomery Story. This was a 16-page comic, published by an anti-war council in 1957. The writer, Alfred Hassler, sent the manuscript to MLK himself, who approved and called it an excellent piece of work. The comic is a retelling of the Montgomery bus strike, and a general call to non-violence. More than 250,000 copies were printed initially, and since it's been reprinted in multiple languages. This work has been mentioned as something that inspired the Greensboro sit-ins in 1960, civil rights icon John Lewis, who we'll get to shortly, and even elements of the Arab Spring. It's a popular and enduring piece of pro-peace, anti-violence literature. Now we'll skip ahead to 1980, when one of the greatest pieces of English literature began to be serialized. Art Spiegelman's Maus, which has since been collected in 2 volumes. Maus retells the story of Spiegelman's father surviving as a Jewish man in 1930s Poland, and eventually his time in the Auschwitz concentration camp. It's also the story of how Spiegelman himself is able to get this story from his father, the effects that such a massive trauma can have on a person, and the relationship between father and son. The widely lauded metaphor of Maus was Spiegelman representing different nationalities or ethnic groups as different anthropomorphic animals. Jewish characters are presented as mice who were prey for the Aryan cats. Last year, I went to the Munich Documentation Center for the History of National Socialism, a museum that documents the rise of the Third Reich and how it came about. At the end of the museum, they have a small bookstore full of dense works of history, memoir, and fiction. And alongside all of these works of prose was Maus. It's impossible to understate the reach and effect of this work, and the impact it can have on readers. Other powerful works of graphic memoirs have taken place throughout the years, such as Alison Bechdel's Fun Home, Marjane Satrapi's Persepolis, and almost the entire body of work of Harvey Pekar. But the last thing I want to mention relates back to the first. In 2013, Congressman John Lewis published the first volume of March, his own graphic memoir, describing his life from childhood through the civil rights struggle to eventually getting elected to Congress. During the book tour, Lewis specifically cited how important the MLK comic was on his philosophy, and how he wanted to write a comic memoir so that other people could have the same experience. March is a wonderful modern work, which I hope can have a similar effect on people to the MLK story. From what is probably the most earnest genre of the political graphic novel, we then go to the least. That is, works of straight-up propaganda. Here we will define propaganda as works of art that aim to influence an audience by selectively presenting facts or using loaded language to provoke an intended response. There is a long, long history of comics as propaganda. Is This Tomorrow? America Under Communism is a 1947 comic which attempts to, quote, make you more alert to the menace of communism. Obviously, this is a pretty garbage comic, but it is again a fascinating relic of its time, and specifically of the Red Scare. If you want to understand more about the society that produced Joe McCarthy, I recommend checking this out. As it's out of copyright, it's currently free online. Next up, Chick Tracts. Created by artist and born-again fundamentalist Jack Chick, Chick Tracts are these tiny little booklets of far-right Christian preaching. Chick Tracts are massively homophobic and sexist, but they also have a bizarre history of being anti-Catholic, as well as hating Dungeons and Dragons and Harry Potter. These comics are widely distributed by different church groups as effective tools of propaganda. The company claims they've published 800 million of these tracts over the years, which, you know, sounds like a lie. But even if the number is only 1% of that, Jack Chick is still one of the most widely read independent comic creators in history, which sucks because this dude's theology is garbage. He genuinely believed that witches exist and are manipulating people through pop culture. For example, check out the incredible issue Dark Dungeons, which you can find online. It's all about how Dungeons and Dragons leads to Satanism. You know, basically the plot of Riverdale Season 3. But lest you believe that comic propaganda is all bad, let's talk about the adventures of Tintin breaking free. This is the work of an artist who uses the iconic imagery of Tintin and the Captain, who for some reason is referred to as Tintin's uncle in this book, and uses it to describe class struggle in Britain, creating a pro-worker, pro-squatting, pro-gay rights, anti-corruption, anti-rich, anti-cop, anti-gentrification, pro-shoplifting, anti-fascist graphic novel. It's a hell of a thing. Tintin Breaking Free is an incredible artifact of workers' rights under Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s. Now, it is a highly polemic piece of work, which, like all propaganda, focuses more on arguing its points than telling a good story. But for the love of God, you get to see Tintin punch a Nazi, and then later on get schooled by his lesbian friend about why his anti-women's lib attitude sucks. I am so happy it exists. Next up, let's take a look at how comics and graphic novels have represented LGBT rights over the years. Alison Bechdel, yes, the woman who named and conceived the Bechdel test, published the comic strip to watch out for. Doesn't feel like I should say that. The strip was famous for its portrayal of many gay and lesbian characters, in what Bechdel herself described as half op-ed column and half endless serialized Victorian novel. The long-running nature of this strip shows the evolution of Bechdel's art, storytelling, and opinions from the Reagan era all the way through to the end of George W. It was a pioneering work of representation and also contains some excellent examples of comic book storytelling. Bechdel officially ended the strip in 2008 to focus on other works, after the massive success of her coming-of-age memoir, Fun Home, another of the greatest graphic novels of all time. Artists Against Rampant Government Homophobia, or ARR, was a 1988 anthology put together by Alan Moore to oppose a specific amendment which outlawed the promotion of homosexuality by government bodies in Britain. This law went as far as banning public schools from even mentioning gay parents. It ended up passing and was sadly in effect until 2003. ARG, however, is perhaps the single most impressive lineup of talent ever put together in a single comic, featuring the works of people who created these comics. Though they failed in their stated intentions of stopping the law from being passed, we now have this excellent record of creators who were proud to stand up for gay rights in a time before that was a widespread common feeling. More recently, the organisation Prism Comics are a non-profit organisation who promote LGBT-themed and made work. They often have booths at Comic-Cons to help promote these works, and they have an online presence which does the same thing. They also award grant money to creators, and have recently started annual awards, recognising everything from webcomics to mainstream comics. If you're on the lookout for LGBT+ representation in comics, I can't recommend Prism Comics highly enough. Anyway, those are just some political comics and graphic novels in history. And I didn't even get to touch on any of these works, since I want to keep this video under an hour, if possible. Anyway, why do political comics like these matter? Studies have shown them being a beneficial tool for science education, medicine education, environmental education, and historical education, among others. As a combination of both visual and textual mediums, comics are a unique way to get information across. In one sense, the absence of too many words can help people who don't like or aren't great at reading to get through a longer narrative. In the exact opposite sense, however, comic art does so much of the heavy lifting and storytelling that it allows the dialogue and writing to be much more subtle in delivering their message, often making for better politically charged material. Similarly, political allegories and metaphors are far more effective when visual than written, in my personal opinion. I think another strength that comics have is that the reader is in total control over how much time is spent on each panel or page. In a TV show or movie, it's a combination of the director, editor, CGI crew, and others who will end up controlling how long an image or scene stays on the screen. Hanging on an image for too little or too long changes the film. For instance, remember that tweet that went viral about that guy saying every film class should teach the shot in the Game of Thrones finale where the dragon came up behind Daenerys? People crucified that take because of how gaudy and obvious that shot was. The camera lingered for so long while those dragon wings were unfurling, practically hitting you over the head with, "Do you get it? She's the dragon. She's not unlike a dragon here. She has dragon wings. Wow." If that shot were a little quicker, it might not have been such a wank. When it comes to comics, there's no force telling you how much time to spend on each image. You're in complete control, and you'll linger on an image for as long as it interests or affects you. If you've been paying attention to American politics at all recently, you've no doubt heard about ICE. Even if you don't know them by name, you know them as the agency who's deporting people in record numbers through various shady and illegal activities, as well as being one of the organisations behind the disastrous child separation policy. I'm going to be mostly quoting from the excellently written and sourced ICE, The Making of an American Gestapo, by Justin Akers-Chacon and Mike Davis. This video won't be able to cover all of their points, so I can't recommend enough that you check out the piece for yourself. Again, there'll be a link in the description. The article contends what we all know to be true, that ICE has emerged as an overt instrument to repress working-class immigrants. There are 11 million undocumented immigrants in the United States, and they make up 17% of the workforce, concentrated in low-wage manual labour positions. The use of this labour has led to massive growth in the US economy since the Reagan era. You know, for the rich people. To quote Chacon and Davis, ICE's targeted raids, systematic detention, and institutionalized practice of selective and ongoing deportation are designed to instill fear in the immigrant community, in accordance with the right-wing strategy of attrition through enforcement. The theory behind this doctrine, articulated first by a white nationalist think tank, is that undocumented people will be encouraged to, quote, self-deport if their lives are made sufficiently miserable through oppressive measures. In Obama's first year of office, almost 390,000 people were deported, 65% of them being non-criminal immigration violators. These are people whose violations were stuff like overstaying their green card or not checking in with ICE as much as they're liking. While the Obama administration later on instructed officers to deprioritize the non-serious offenders, these guidelines were kicked out under Donald Trump. ICE now exists only to deport as many suspected immigrants as possible. In fact, immigrants can now be deported for things that To quote the article, they could be charged for, i.e., things determined solely by the ICE agent themselves. So, an agent could detain any undocumented person they encounter, or person they suspect is undocumented, claiming that they are someone who potentially crossed the border without authorization. These guidelines make every undocumented person in America deportable regardless of their circumstances. To make things worse, between 2003 and 2017, at least 172 detainees have died while in ICE custody. You would be forgiving for thinking that this rash of deportation comes solely from a white nationalist ethic, but that's simply not true. See, half of ICE's 2018 budget, $3.6 billion, went into contracting private jails and private prisons. The private prison industry is profiting massively by, you guessed it, cutting costs at every level, and providing atrocious living standards for their detainees. More than just white supremacy, ICE has been allowed to prosper because it's fueling a multi-billion-dollar sector of the private prison industry. Chacon and Davis point out that the largest immigrant detention contractor in the nation, GEO, earned over $2.2 billion of revenue in 2017, raking in money both from government contracts and by charging their detainees for health and educational services. This same company donated $475,000 to both a Trump-supporting super PAC and to Trump's inauguration festivities. Another major private prison contractor gave $250,000. Since election day, those companies' stock prices have gone up by 63% and 81% respectively. Fun fact, in 2012, GEO hired David Venturella, Obama's head of deportation and detention operations in ICE. Very cool and very legal. Chacon and Davis end their article with this statement. Despite the sudden and inspiring growth of calls to abolish ICE, this agency won't be done away with very easily. From both political parties, as well as the repressive apparatus of the US state. With all that in mind, I want to tell you about a project I support. J Andrew Weld, or Andy as he goes by, is an illustrator, designer, and visual activist. In the past, his work has been featured in Rewire News, Artists Against Police Brutality, and the Resistance Center for Peace and Justice. He's also published his own Occupy Wall Street-inspired webcomic titled Right About Now. Andy's current work in progress is a graphic novel simply titled Abolish ICE. It's an anthology which will present several different stories, ranging from satire to non-fiction to fiction inspired by real events, all to do with the fascistic actions of ICE and the Border Patrol in recent years. He's going to be working with several collaborators who have been affected in different ways by ICE in order to better bring their stories to light. Recently, Andy launched an IndieGoGo campaign aimed at getting him to El Paso, Texas. In his own words, he aims to meet with a variety of activists, migrants, and institutions, including the ICE Tent City concentration camp, the Holocaust and Border Patrol museums, and meeting people so that he can learn how the city has changed in the past 20 years. I think that this project is an important story that could fit in with the tradition of political graphic novels that I've laid out in this video. Though Andy is a fair bit off completing his funding goal, IndieGoGo's funding system means that whatever he has pledged, he will receive. He's also in the process of ensuring that he'll be able to get down there even if he doesn't complete the funding. Right now, we're going to go to an interview that I composed with Andy last week. We'd never spoken before, but our mutual obsession with comics and politics meant we ended up chatting for about 2.5 hours. I've cut that down to a lean 10 to 15 minutes for you. So please, listen to J Andrew Weld in his own words about why this project is important, and check out the IndieGoGo campaign. Consider donating, or if you can't afford it, perhaps sharing it with your friends and loved ones. Again, here's my interview with J Andrew Weld. Alright, so I'm here with J Andrew Weld, who also personally goes by Andy. Andy, it's a pleasure to talk to you, mate.
Hey, it is a pleasure to meet you too.
Alright, so let's get right into it. I've talked a little bit about your graphic novel already in this video, but can you just go ahead and give me the elevator pitch?
Alright, so you go in on the first floor, push a button.
No, we have those. We have those here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think they're called lifts over there.
Yeah.
All right. No. The plan of the book is to you hear lots of just harrowing stories or hear audio recordings of children in cages crying, and it can be so alienating. And I'm trying to create a book that will help humanize the stories, but also give a way for people to actually communicate these ideas in a more lucid way than just abstract figures and numbers.
Yeah, and I think that's something that comics and graphic novels have a really strong power to do that, and I'm not 100% sure why, but...
Well, a lot of it has to do with what comes in between the panels.
Yeah.
If you've ever read Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud,
yeah, great
he
book.
actually talks about how what happens between panel 1 and panel 2 is all in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's actually partly what makes comics so great.
Yeah. One of the things I'm most interested in your book is that it's going to be an anthology. So it's going to be a lot of different stories all in one work. And these are going to be coming from things that are based on true stories and then things that are just influenced by true events. And so I guess my question is, like, and I hate this question, I do, but what is your creative process in terms of when you see one of these stories? Do you automatically have an insight whether, this is going to be something I want to tell the exact story of, or do you just go, this is something that I want to interweave into a fictional narrative?
Well, it really depends on the story, actually, because, for example, one of the stories I hope to tell is that of Naibir Abdullah, who was a Iraqi immigrant who fled when Saddam Hussein took over and overstayed his visa. And he has this compelling story about meeting a woman in Central Park who was horseback riding, and they fell hopelessly in love, and their families broke them up, but then she finds out she's pregnant with this child, and she raises this child with this other person who never knew who his real dad was, and then years later he tracks down his son on Facebook, and they reunite and rekindle their love, and then ICE arrests him for no reason, and then he's got like these this kidney problems and is on his deathbed, and he marries the love of his life while in jail.
Wow.
But he's actually released now, and
wow.
I have not seen any stories, but he should have just had his final case, and he should be clear now.
Yeah, fingers
if
crossed.
everything went according to plan. But I've not seen the verdict because I got really sick right around that time.
I mean,
I got to follow up on that.
That sounds like the kind of story that you couldn't even embellish on, huh? You're like,
no,
what are you going to add to that?
It's so much to it, and I when you hear actual like stories about a person, that's what you want to do is try to tell, get as close to that as possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when you hear things like people are crossing the border, live their lives as American citizens, and because they were born by midwives, they weren't born in a hospital. They were like born in their house. The border patrol's like tearing up passports and saying, no, you're not an American citizen, and like keeping them in Mexico.
Wow. That's astonishing.
So stories like that, I have to create my own kind of story to tell something.
But so one of the main reasons that I really want to do this video with you is because you've currently got this IndieGoGo campaign sort of around the project of this graphic novel. And so I was just wondering if you could tell me what's the reason for the IndieGoGo campaign specifically?
Well, the big thing is I was actually born in El Paso, and I've gone back. I did grow up in Texas a bit, but not not on the border. And so El Paso is a city that actually kind of means something to me. The whole idea is to actually go there. It kind of, would bookend my life in a certain way. As George Lucas would say, it rhymes.
What's interesting about El Paso is that's a town with such a rich history of, not even just being on the border, but like that's originally Mexico, right? Like, I mean, Texas as a whole.
Yeah, well, Texas has a really fascinating history because we have an amusement park, and I think it's worldwide now, but I know it's all over the States, called Six Flags.
Uh-huh.
And Six Flags actually stands for the Six Flags that flew over Texas,
Oh,
which
really?
is Mexico, Spain, France, the Texas flag because it was a country too,
Hmm.
the Confederacy, and the United States.
Wow.
And you could tell I paid attention in my Texas history classes.
Or you paid attention at Six Flags.
I bet too. Absolutely.
It just shows the randomness and luck of if you were born in that town at a different time, you could have been Mexican or you could have been French or a Texan nationalist. But, through this just cosmic luck, you're born an American, and the difference between that and being born in a South American country and then trying to find your way to America, it's really incredible to think about, I think. Another thing I'm really excited about in your project is it's not just a book full of stories about how horrible ICE is, and it is, but more
yeah.
than that, you're actually trying to go into some ideas that people have had on how to actually abolish ICE, how to get rid of this horrible modern day Gestapo.
Well, I'm going to be totally honest with you, and same thing in the book. I kind of going to lean heavy on Niente's Free Our Future plan, where they have like a 14-step, if I remember correctly, to end what's been going on at the border. The first thing is abolish ICE itself,
Yeah.
because, like I said, it is a duplicate law
Yeah.
enforcement service.
It does not need to exist.
Remove this one's already done, but basically remove Jeff Sessions as Attorney General.
Oh yeah.
So you don't need to worry about that one. Repeal laws that are criminalizing immigration or migration,
Mm-hmm.
which, like I said, that was a lot of those were passed during the Bush and Obama years.
Yeah.
I mean, not Bush, Bush too, but Clinton, Bush, and Obama years. So they created this problem.
Yeah.
But the end all forms of immigration detention.
Yeah.
But my favorite thing is defund Border Patrol and fund a border rescue.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Which is yeah. And I mean the thing is what's often missed in conversations is the process of asking for asylum.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just because somebody asks for asylum does not mean that they're necessarily going to be granted it. But there's a process for it, and the first process is to get into the United States. And it doesn't say anywhere in the law how they can do that, but they have to be on U.S. soil to ask for asylum.
Yeah.
And typically, when people are out in the desert, as soon as they see somebody, they'll be like, asylum, asylum, asylum.
Mm.
And then, they're rounded up and treated like, prisoners of war.
Yeah.
Especially now that we have a vigilante force roaming around out there with guns, pointing it at the heads of these people.
So another thing I'd really love to ask about is, was there a moment when you decided to do this project? Like was there a snapping point, or was it just an accumulative thing where things just piled up?
When heard the tapes of the children crying, and I'm just like, no, I gotta do something. This isn't right.
Yeah.
Because growing up, I read lots of like the comic book creators were all Jewish creators.
Yeah.
So the Holocaust and World War II was almost like in the DNA of a lot of comic books. So and I'm like sitting there going, well, I got to do something. Like, what would Jack Kirby do? He'd punch a Nazi.
Yeah. Something else that I think is really cool about the proposal you've got is, although you're going to be the artist on each of these works, you're thinking about or hoping to work with some other writers as well. How much of that can you talk about?
There's a lot I can't talk about.
Yeah.
The big thing is right now, there's no contract signed, nothing, nothing definite. So anything I say now, any names I drop might not actually appear in the end project. But I'm pretty sure David Slavic, who is producer of the Michael Brooks Show, is he's helping me kind of edit the project, and he's also going to write one of the stories about one of his students. Which, funny thing, we started talking, and we were talking about the same dude, and literally like I was trying to find a writer for the story because I didn't know this guy.
Mm.
He was a dreamer who was a big activist, and one of the things ICE does is target activists, especially dreamers.
Yeah.
And he left his wallet in his apartment, grabbed a taxi cab, and couldn't pay like the less than $10 it was for the taxi ride.
Mm.
And because of that, was arrested, convicted, and sent to Mexico.
Wow. For a $10 taxi ride.
Yep.
Incredible.
It is, yeah, and like I say, he was one of David's students.
Oh wow, yeah.
Which is really small world.
Tiny.
Another person I'm talking with is Jake Flores of Pod Damn America.
Yeah, I follow him on Twitter. He's really funny.
Oh, he's great. He's great. I go, hey, you want to write a story for this? And I go, about what happened with you? And he's like, sure, man, but I've never written a comic before. And I'm like, don't worry about it. It's really easy. You're a comedian. Comedians thinking beats. Comics are beats.
Yeah, 100%.
Panels, you go from panel to panel, page to page. That's your beats. He's like, oh, well, I could do this.
Because what happened with him was he got in trouble with ICE from a tweet, right?
Yeah, he told a joke.
Yeah.
Something like he tweeted out Cinco de Mayo that if you kill one ICE agent, they'll let white people wear a sombrero, and if you kill two, you get to wear the sombrero and the poncho.
Yeah, that's a good joke.
So the next day, like he hasn't even woken up yet.
Yeah.
They're knocking on his door, and they kind of came in. He's a little hungover because it was the day after Cinco de Mayo. Yeah.
So another question I definitely wanted to get to was, so when it comes to graphic novels and comics, and specifically in this genre, who would you say are your biggest influences?
I mean, I grew up reading X-Men, which was obviously civil rights allegory.
Yeah, yeah.
So can't miss that. I mean, Chris Claremont as a writer, fantastic. I was reading the Silvestri Jim Lee era.
Oh yeah.
Which is the best. And
someone we've talked about a bit before this is the comics of Joe Sacco.
Yes. The thing is I never knew that there was a concept of journalism comics until Joe Sacco. I found him much later, and I'm sitting there thinking man, I could have I should have done this instead of getting a job after college.
Yeah.
Take an opportunity to travel and go someplace and write a comic about that. Yeah, Sacco is he really finds the humanity in the situation, and then allows you to kind of sit there with yourself and understand it in ways that you couldn't just by watching the news or reading a book from a scholarly expert on the area.
So about the IndieGoGo campaign, people looking to support it, there are a couple of different rewards. I don't know if you if you know them off the top of your head or anything.
So what I want to do is kind of almost preserve in a way of where I'm at with things, but also do a tour diary, as in comic form.
Yeah.
Which would actually be a kind of an interesting challenge for me to actually bang something out every night. It's going to be raw. It's going to be personal and whatnot. I'm probably going to hand letter it on my iPad as opposed to if there's going to be spelling mistakes.
Yeah.
It's going to have that personal touch to it.
Basically, what you're saying is for a $2 donation, you get a digital copy of that comic of this super personal work that it's going to. In some ways, it almost feels like it's going to help set the stage for the final piece. I think it's going to be a really interesting journey to follow it from, this work in progress diary to what will then hopefully be this, big anthology with this meta narrative and all this really interesting stuff.
Yeah, and 200 pages. And having an ash can, almost which it kind of excites me because it's almost like a zine too. It's a smaller version, but also has a bit of that rawness because there's going to be something a little punk rock about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the Ashcan copy is for a $5 donation, and you've got just a general floppy for $10.
Yeah, it's going to be the comic book size.
Right, nice. It's like a full
standard comic book size. It's gonna I might put in maybe like a prose piece like explaining stuff, and I'll find where it is. But
cool.
Fortunately, like here in the States, we can.
A couple of the other rewards you've got offered. You've got the virtual quick draw, which is so that's the thing you usually stream on your YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, every morning I will, during the week. I try not to do it on weekends.
And so the idea of this perk is that you're saying, hey, I'll draw you and
or whatever you want.
Wherever yeah, okay. So it could be a present or anything.
Yeah, I mean, if you draw me Davos Seaworth of Game of Thrones, I'm like,
hell yeah,
I can do that. Draw Theresa May.
do not. I will pay you.
Okay.
I will pay you $30 to not draw Theresa May.
Right, I'm drawing Theresa May tomorrow. No.
If I don't. But if people want to see examples of the stuff you've done, you can check out Andy's work on Twitter, which is at right about now 2. It's under J Andrew Weld. If we keep going down the different perks, you've also got a poster of one of the proposed covers. That would be very cool to have.
I don't even know if it's going to be like the final cover or anything, but I think people will really respond to that one that I put up there.
Yeah.
It's of a militarized police uniform guy just kind of sitting there and says "Abolish ICE" across it.
And so the rest of the perks, there's one that's the same as the quick draw, but this is to get the physical.
Yeah, I'll let you do up a print of it because I'm still doing it on my iPad. I've switched to the iPad, and it's just been incredible because all the work that you actually see is done on the iPad.
Yeah. And then you've also got some t-shirt designs lower down. And if anyone's really generous, they can also go ahead and get the whole shebang.
All of them.
Which is everything. I would encourage that anyone who's watching this, anyone who's seen this, if you can chip in a couple of bucks, get this digital comic. I couldn't recommend it more. If you don't have the money, which we've all been there, try sharing it with a couple of friends and see if they can help. Because, like I said, I think this is a really important, really good project. We can all help in our own small ways, and this is one of them. So where is the best place? I've already plugged your Twitter, but if you want to say that again, where's the best place for people to find your work and just see what it is that you're doing?
Well, right now, really, I'm working with David Slavic to build a webpage. He's really good at that stuff. I'm not. I know how to make stuff look pretty, but I don't know how to put it on the web.
Yeah.
So really, my Twitter is the best place to do it. I am terrible at remembering to post stuff, and it's all on me to do.
And you can be found on YouTube under J Andrew Weld.
Yes.
Just some really. For anyone who's interested in this for the artistic side, that's where to go check it out.
And I actually do talk mostly about art. I'd love it if somebody popped into the chat and got me talking about politics. But
I think we can end it there. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on. This is an absolute pleasure.
This has been a treat too. Here,
I look forward to seeing where this all goes.
Absolutely, yeah. Same here. I'm looking forward to hearing what you keep in here because I don't know if both George Lucas jokes are going to be in there.
You can't have you either have both or none. It's difficult.
Exactly. Yes.